So do you guys want the good news or the bad news first? Well, first, we got the good news that student loans were being forgiven and canceled. And then we realized how bad that actually is. And fresh off the press, Papa Powell spoke in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, talking about what the Fed is going to do with the economy. Spoiler alert, we're still at 40-year all-time highs for inflation. Nothing is going to get cheaper. And if you thought these last couple months were bad, it's only going to get worse. So if any of what I just told you made you optimistic about the future and brighten up your day, stay with me for the next 10 minutes and let's talk about what all this means and what it means for the future and our economy. Now, the first thing that we have to talk about is the loan forgiveness. Now, over the past 2 years, Joe Biden and the entire government have really struggled with the economy. Duh. So what Biden decided to do is hop on the cancel culture train, and he just canceled everyone's student loans. Well, kind of. Now, obviously, this was one of his talking points when he was running for presidency.
I was going to put him
And, well, it's here, but we also know that it was really not the best of ideas. I think on paper, it really sounded good, but when you're printing this much paper to make that type of a thing go away, there's going to be problems. And for a brief second, everyone was really relieved, especially myself, who owns student debt with over $20,000 still in student debt. So at the end of the day, this is really no different than those Instagram gurus flexing their brains for a few likes, except this is a little bit more of on an extensive scale, may we say. But basically what happened is that Biden announced that he's going to cancel $10,000 in student loan debt for basically anyone that makes under $125,000 a year, and up to $20,000 for anyone who also received a Pell Grant. Now, if you don't know what a Pell Grant is, it's basically when your family makes under $60,000 a year in total household income. And so basically what they're saying is that you're financially broke, so they're going to give you extra money from the government, and you don't have to pay that back. Now, on top of that, Biden also extended the moratorium so you don't have to pay back your student loans until the end of the year, which he's done for the 7th time. And he said he's not going to do it again. But honestly, at this rate, it seems like nobody's going to have to pay back their student loans anyway. So extending the moratorium isn't really a big thing, but it is a nice thing if you've benefited from it to this point like I have. And for anybody wondering, if you already paid off your student debt and tried to be a responsible human being and tried to do the right thing, well, you're kind of SOL at this point, and the government's really not going to look out for you, and you're probably not going to get reimbursed.
Ah, dang it.
So let's talk about what this actually means and the numbers behind why this is so important. So currently, as of right now, a rough estimate, there's around 45 million people who actually owe on their student debt, and the average student debt that everyone owes is around $25,000. So this actually equates to around $1.6 trillion owed to the government in student debt, because when you really break it down, around 90% of the student debt comes from federal instead of private companies. So when we're talking about paying off a lot of these loans, a lot of that money is just not going to go back to the federal government instead of these private companies, which could have a very big effect on our economy. And it seems kind of funny because just a couple of weeks ago, they introduced the Inflation Reduction Act. And now what they're talking about is wiping away $1.6 trillion of student debt, or what we're really talking about is around $300 billion. But still, when the money printer go brrr, that usually means inflation. And when inflation starts to get worse, especially when we're already at 10%, well, things don't really look good for the future. Now, Biden says that this Forgiveness Act, or this loan forgiveness, is going to help people in the lower income categories. Well, a study says different. There's a study that says over 60% of people that are going to benefit most from this are the people that are making over 100K to the 125K range, and those are probably the people who are going to benefit most. People who didn't pay off their loans and are still making a lot of money, but people who aren't making a lot of money really aren't going to benefit the most from this, according to this study. Now, instead of actually forgiving people's loans and just wiping it away, we're going to come back to this problem decades from now. So why not actually start at the real root of the cause? And that's college prices. College prices have gone up 5 times more over than inflation and anything else in this period of time. And if colleges know that they're just going to have their loans forgiven, or they're going to have students who really don't care about racking up student loans because the government's going to forgive it in the future, then colleges are more incentivized to actually make college even more expensive, because they can put more money in their pockets, and they know that the students are going to rely on the government to just take that loan away. So that kind of is the root problem right there. And if we look at other countries, like if you pair up Switzerland versus the US, there's over 70% of people who go to college in the United States, and it's one of the most expensive. But when you look at Switzerland, where college is free, around a quarter of the people actually go to college to get their education. And the main reason for that is because they don't see college as valuable. They actually see work experience, apprenticeships, and internships way more beneficial than a piece of paper that tells you that you can do your job. Now, again, kind of going back to how much this could cost, right now we have $1.6 trillion in student debt. The odds of us paying all of that off or wiping it away, very improbable, but it's likely according to some of these people. Now, the real cost could cost around $300 billion, which is still an insane amount of money, which kind of takes us to what Powell was talking about. Now, imagine sharing a bank account with someone who just can't stop spending money, and you're the person making the budget, and every week they're just a shopaholic and they continue to spend money, way more money than you actually have, and you have to continue to adjust the budget, and eventually you figure out you don't have enough money to support their spending habit. Well, this is like the Federal Reserve and Joe Biden and the government right now. They're spending way too much money, and money that we don't even have. And that really creates a problem for the Federal Reserve, because at a certain point they need to put their foot down and basically say there's no more spending, or we're going to have to take really bad actions. Bad in terms of, the middle class and the economy. Now, the Federal Reserve really has three main things that they focus on: employment, stable prices, and interest rates. And they can kind of fluctuate these determining on what the economy is doing and how the government is spending their money. Now, here's a couple really big takeaways that Powell talked about and what he plans on doing in the future that could affect you on a day-to-day level. So Powell acknowledged that inflation isn't going to be slowing down, and even over the past couple months, even though it has slowed down, really it's just going to continue to ramp up, especially with us spending this much money in the government. So one of the things he's going to do is he's going to continue to make interest rate hikes, and he's going to probably do it at record numbers. And he also said even though it sucks, prices are probably not going to come down, because one of their main goals is stable prices, and to bring prices back down, that's actually going to mess with a lot of this stuff. So the gas prices, the food, the clothing, everything you're used to right now at this moment is probably here to stay. Oh, and did I mention interest rate hikes? Yeah, he's going to continue to do that. Well, let's go back to the loan forgiveness thing for a little bit. If you keep spending money, it makes inflation worse, which makes interest rates worse, which hurt the economy, which actually hurts the middle class the most. Now, I think it's really to no one's surprise that the middle class always gets bent over and gets taken advantage of the most in the economy. You have the higher upper class, which basically knows the tax game, so they can kind of weasel the way out. The middle class is basically the ones paying the most tax, and they're the ones getting shafted the most. And then the lower class is taking advantage of both the upper and the middle class. So at the end of the day, if you're middle class, like myself and almost everybody else, then I'm sorry. But things are not going to get easier. Now, obviously, lower income households are still being hit hard by inflation, but when you actually look at the numbers, it's the middle class that's being hit the hardest by these inflation numbers. And according to a study in July, 7% fewer households making between $50K and $99K per year said that they actually had money left over after monthly expenses in July of 2021. Basically meaning everybody who's making under $100,000 a year is almost living paycheck to paycheck, which is really sad to think about, because that's just not how it was decades ago. And I think the crazy thing too is that wages do not keep up with this, and it's pretty evident to see. And on top of that, things are only going to get worse in terms of interest rate hikes, inflation, and basically everything that we don't want to go up is going to go up, and everything that we want to go up is just going to stay the same, aka our wages and how much we actually make. Now, if you've made it this far, first off, I just want to say thank you, and I also want to say sorry. I know that this video was kind of like a lot about doom and gloom, but I really want to bring you guys the truth about what's happening in the economy, and I don't want to really sugarcoat it, because things are going to get a little bit worse, but they do need to get worse before they get better. Now, before I leave you, I have a really good analogy that kind of shows why a recession needs to happen in the United States and why we should never actually push it off. Now, a recession is just like a human person. A human person can only stay awake for so long. Eventually, they need to go to sleep. Just like the economy eventually needs to go through a recession, right? Because just like stocks, they never always go up. They eventually need to come back down, retrace, and then regroup. And that's what we're going through right now. When 2020 hit with the world pandemic, instead of letting us go through a recession, or instead of letting us, take our natural course, the government pumped us with a bunch of money, which is like the same thing that, let's say it's 10 p.m. and you just shotgun 2 Red Bulls. Well, you're not going to be able to go to sleep, and you're going to suffer for the next day. That's exactly what happened with the economy in 2020. The government pumped us with a bunch of money, or so to say caffeine. They kept us up for longer than we actually did, and now we're going to crash even harder than we should have 2 years ago. So what we're actually facing now is the consequences of government intervention in our economy, and right now that's just something that we're going to have to bear and face, and the next few months are definitely not looking the most optimistic, but it's definitely one of the best times to actually get into the markets, because prices are so low, everything's looking doom and gloom, and at the end of the day, it's better to just hodl and always stay the course, because the long-term game of investing will always win. Now, before I let you guys go, I do have to ask you a favor. Can you like and subscribe down below, and also leave a comment if you like this type of style of video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.